At 2:11 a.m., when the fridge clicked on with a tiny transformer buzz, I saw a stranger's hand slide into the freezer behind a box of frozen dumplings. The hand knew exactly where to reach. The alarm clock camera on the sideboard gave a faint blink, and I shut my eyes again, counting my heartbeat by twos so I wouldn't jump. The blue card had been there for the third night. A decoy, the way we labeled certain pallets at the warehouse, looks the same, but every box is tagged in ways you can't see. I did everything right, kept my walk the same, left my keys in the same dish, turned off the lights on schedule, and complained loudly about the weather and my joints, so they'd believe I'd go to bed and stay there. When the door closed, I took a breath, got up, and went for the phone. The bank text landed before I could open the app. Purchase, gas station chain, $280, 0213. Then another, online boutique, $1,240. And another, check cash and kiosk, $600. I had exactly $15,000 and a little extra for medication. With each alert, the room felt lower, like the ceiling was sinking. I looked at numbers and thought, not about amounts, but about sequence, log, screenshots, printouts, match the times. At the warehouse, we called it running the route. Before this, the nights were different. My son had been staying with me just until he's back on his feet. He came with Cassidy, smile brighter than a parking lot lamp. She started with ma'am, then switched to mom, took out the trash and swept up the change from the table, hipped the fridge door shut like the house already knew her weight. I let it slide, the way you do when you want to believe a stranger can become family. The first thing that went missing wasn't money. It was order. I keep my receipts in a shoebox, flattened, sorted by month, every corner turned left, so under the light they make one smooth field. At night, I stacked them. In the morning, one slip sat edge up. Paper told me what no one else noticed. I set a camera, hid a recording key fob, moved the real card into a wallet on the closet floor, and put the blue one in the freezer, its own account, with my money transferred over. My fingers weren't shaking from fear, from anger at myself for living long enough to set traps in my own kitchen. By 6 a.m., the balance was down $8,000. I made it to the print shop at the strip mall. The kid with the nose ring never looked up. On the way back, I watched Cassidy return. Hoodie up, sneakers, paper cup in hand. She closed the door carefully, the way you close a drawer in someone else's office. I laid the evidence on the table, lined it up with a ruler. My son came down an hour later. He wore the face of a man who has to solve someone else's problem again. "Mom," he said, "did you forget how much you took out for your meds?" I said nothing. I showed him the printouts, the timestamps on the video, the bright cherry red manicure that flickered in the frame. He looked the way you look at a wreck on the interstate. Like you see it, but don't feel it until you think about your own tires. "Cass didn't do this," he said. "And if she took anything, you told her it was okay. You're forgetting things." "You're forgetting" was a punch below the belt. I remember truck routes from 10 years back. I remember bill of lading numbers. I can tell by the frayed edge of a receipt which knife I used that day. Forgetting, for me, is worse than death. But the words had already bent the air. He picked up his phone. A minute later, Cassidy stood in the doorway with wounded eyes. "I don't steal, Miss Mirskaya," she said. "You gave me the card just for gas. It was probably a double charge. That was art. Miss keeps the distance. Gas sounds like care. Double charge. A system glitch to blame for someone else's hand. My son drew a breath, stepped closer to her. I understood that this night was only the beginning. The money wasn't what was on the line. My voice in this house was. The symbol wasn't the blue card. It was the shoebox of receipts, my archive, my memory. I set the fresh copy shop slip on top and closed the lid. I sealed the evidence like pickles. No extra air. The small turn came 2 hours later. The bank called and offered to review the charges in person. And an in-person visit is always both a chance and a trap. The credit union greeted me with glass partitions, chrome-legged chairs, and a coffee machine where the water tasted like plastic. The girl with the name badge smiled like her cheeks were switched on by a button. I set down my printouts, the card, my ID. She nodded, took notes. When I said 2:11 a.m., her pen didn't even twitch. "We'll certainly take a look," she said. "But you didn't give anyone else access to your card, correct?" At that exact moment, the anyone else was texting me. "Ma'am, are you at the bank? Can you grab milk? We're out." Cassidy wasn't losing pace. I walked out with a brochure called How to Protect Yourself, as if I were my own attacker. In the parking lot, the security guard called after me. "Nice camera work," he said, nodding at the still I was holding. "It's clear. The problem is legal. Without a confession, it's tough. Confession is a rare animal. You don't trap it with words. You trap it with circumstances. I learned that at the warehouse. Once we caught a crew who'd pop container seals and set them back, no marks. We nailed them on the schedule. Routes lined up with shifts, and the random delays happened on repeat. We got our confession only after we split their pairs. People betray each other when staying loyal gets uncomfortable. I called Juan, the shift lead who's been about to retire for 3 years. "Mara, you left the job," he said. "What happened?" "It happened," I said. "I need your camera on the feeder road. Remember that storage place off our block? I need to know who pulled in between 2 and 3. He remembered. 3 hours later, I had a photo. Cassidy's sedan with borrowed plates sliding into the dark corridor between metal roll-up doors. They rent units there, the kind where people keep seasonal tires, old sofas, and other people's secrets. I've never had a storage unit. Mine are shoeboxes of receipts and the shelves in my head. I went there, posing as a customer. The manager pitched specials and discounts. I was counting ceiling cameras and the gate timer. I rented a small unit for a month, paid cash, took the code. That night, I went back to the kitchen. My son, headphones on, watched videos. The world shrunk to his screen like everyone's these days. I set the folder in front of him. "It's her," I said. "Car, time, trajectory. The money's going to the check cashing kiosk and into a storage unit." He pushed the folder away as if paper could burn. His face went to stone. "You're losing it," he said quietly. "You're spying. You're turning our home into a warehouse." Warehouse hit me. That's my language, my memory, my way not to drown. To him, it's cold, cameras, freight, everything impersonal. He stood, paced. On the countertop, his palm left a faint print. A tiny map, a relief you can't scrub off. "You've got 2 weeks," he said. "Find a place. You're hurting us." I didn't cry. I stacked documents into the folder the way you wrap pallets, tight, like shrink wrap. My blood pressure hammered like fists on sheet metal. I posted a room for rent notice, booked a bunk at the motel by the interchange. Cheap, with an ice machine in a closet, and a carpet that smelled like bleach. Before I left, I went down to the basement. hauled up my old reliable sewing machine, pawned it. That covered the motel deposit, a lawyer's retainer, and a brick of batteries for the cameras. You make choices out of what you have on hand. The micro turn happened at the check cashing kiosk. I tailed Cassidy to the glass booth, where a woman behind bulletproof glass counted bills and smiled only with her lips. Cassidy slid a bag through the slot and got a fat stack of cash back. On the bag, I caught a sticker, the logo of a bargain tax place across the street. Rumor said they filed returns in a way that made refunds rise like yeast dough. All the threads led there. I didn't go to the police. Police like simple stories. You take it, you return it. Mine wasn't simple. It was trust, family loyalty, cash, kiosks, storage boxes, and one old mistake I never talk about. 10 years ago, my husband landed in the hospital, and the insurance didn't cover half the bill. I borrowed from a neighbor for a week and took her card just for gas. A week stretched into a month. I paid back every cent, but the taste of it stayed with me. Pain leaves a memory. I know how it passes from hand to hand. I signed up for a free consult at a legal clinic by the church off the highway. The line ran along the wall. The air smelled like cheap coffee and wet clothes. An older woman next to me hugged a folder the way I hugged mine. We shared a look. Solidarity doesn't need words. "You don't need a lawyer," said a young guy in a plaid shirt after I spilled my printouts across the table. "You need an insurance adjuster. This smells like a scheme." The scheme went like this. People with access to seniors' cards, home aides, sitters, friends' daughters, start with small tests, then hit a big event. Online buys with easy returns, cash outs at late-night kiosks, plus fake refunds for incorrect charges. The tax office plays laundromat. Tax refunds land on virtual cards that vanish right away. The turn came when I learned the owner's name. Evelyn Hart, Cassidy's mother. I saw them together in a storefront reflection. One thing in two mirrors. I took the risk. The point of no return was renting a unit in the same row as theirs. I got a duplicate key cut and asked the manager for a small cash favor. Money is still the best grease for the little cogs of a big world. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just winked when I said I wanted my unit next door. I put a motion sensor in my unit and a micro camera aimed down the aisle. At night, you could hear only the motel fridges across the lot, turning air into noise. I sat in the dark, counted heartbeats, logged times. When Cassidy came down the aisle, I barely breathed. Evelyn was with her, hair pulled back, face unreadable. They opened the neighboring door, hauled out two bags like the ones I'd seen at the kiosk, and stuffed them into the trunk. I shot the plate. Called Juan, through friends. He traced the car across city cameras to the interchange. The trail went cold there. Fewer eyes beyond that point. Back at the motel, someone cursed in the hallway. The TV in the next room blared politics. I wrote in my notebook, Evelyn, cash out, unit, 001:37 a.m. My notes are my crutches. Without them, I fall. In the morning, I went to my son. I didn't want to, but I had to. "It's not just her," I said. "It's a network. If we stay quiet, tomorrow it won't be me." He looked past me. On the table lay a white form, a petition for a protective order. Cassidy cried in the bedroom loud enough for me to hear. He held the paper out to me. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "You're turning our home into a command center." I left. On the stairs, my fingers shook. I pressed my back to the wall and counted to 100. Down below, a man carried a box to the dumpsters. Trimmed edges of photographs stuck out. I always feel sorry for other people's offcuts. They hold proof of someone's life. The microturn came out of nowhere. An envelope waited for me at the motel. No return address. Inside, a check for $900 and a note. I'll pay the rest. Please don't go to the police. The handwriting was young, rushed, not Cassidy's. Then who? The answer arrived a day later. Evelyn had another helper at the office, a girl from food service who sometimes did surveys with people waiting in line. Her hand is the one that shook. The insurance adjuster from the clinic showed up without logos or swagger. A dusty car, a folder with paper tabs, a pencil. His name was Martin Hale. He listened the way dispatchers do when a driver calls in with half a tank and a jammed interchange. No, oh wow, no drama. Just, what happened? Minute by minute. Where's it documented? Who did you call and when? I laid out transaction printouts, camera stills, timestamps, the way I used to spread bills of lading by route. In the end, he said, we needed a set pick, a single shot with everyone in frame. Her handler, the cash out spot, the money carrier. Without that, it's a family dispute, and people get lazy. We picked Friday, the day the line at the glass booth runs longer than the pharmacy before a storm. I'd drop the blue card with a tracker. Lila would signal when they were near. Martin would close the loop to the fraud unit. The plan slotted into my head like a warehouse map. Pallets here, ramp there, security, walking a predictable arc. I stepped out of the motel cafe with my notebook and checklist, and then shadows fell across me. Two uniforms filled the doorway, as if the room belonged to them. A court order smells like wet paper, and the other side's win. Violation of boundaries, stalking, hidden cameras. I froze and reminded them. Every camera of mine is legal, in my house or in public space. My words dropped like bolts into gravel. Sound, no grip. At the station, the plastic bench chilled through clothes. Fluorescent lights ticked in a mean little way. A woman with a tight bun flipped pages and repeated family conflict, like a diagnosis that erases responsibility. They handed me water in a foam cup. It left the taste of chemicals and humiliation on my lips. Heavy steps rattled the corridor. A familiar officer in a fresh shirt walked by without looking. On the wall, fraud victims are not to blame. Below it, a basket of protect yourself pamphlets. Those brochures always skip the one line that matters. Your loved one's hands can be part of the scam. They released me on a signature. One more step, and it's cuffs. Outside, wind chased trash like serving me summons after summons. I made it back to the motel and, for the first time, let myself picture a full defeat, the way you build the worst-case slide at a logistics review. The money gone, my son closing the door, Cassidy calling me toxic, me hemming strangers' jeans by the car wash, counting tips in coins. My folder lay splayed on the bed. I opened the top file, a shot from the booth. In the glass, there I was, hunched, phone in hand. A witness who can't see herself is a poor witness. I took a breath and dialed Martin. He picked up on the first ring. The order is their move. Ours is not to flinch. Friday still on? It's on, I said. Then, after a beat, I don't have a home anymore. He paused, then said something oddly comforting. Then you're freer than most. The night broke into short segments. The ice machine rattling, stuttered voices through the wall, trucks on the highway like whales in a dark river. I thumbed through receipts like prayer beads. On one, I found a little pen heart. My note about a copy shop discount. That tiny mark kept me from the edge. If I drew a heart that day, I still had room for irony then, which means I can find it again. Near 3 a.m., a text came from an unknown number. It's Lila. They said they'll pin it all on you. The camera crazy lady. I don't want in. I can tell you about the refunds and virtual cards. Just don't let them throw me under the bus. I reread it. I'm not police and not a charity. But I am a grown woman who can promise simple things. You won't be left alone, I wrote back. The words looked thin, but behind them stood everything I was ready to do. Show up, speak up, carry someone else's folder to the right desk, sit beside her when she shakes. The world is rough and runs on counts, but sometimes you can brace it with your hands, and it doesn't fall. Morning brought a handful of nerve pricks, an email from the bank, dispute denied pending review, a clinic reminder, don't forget your meds, and a text from my son. Please don't come. She's pregnant. We need peace. The last line slid into me like a needle. I didn't answer. Anything I'd say would read like blame, even good morning. Instead, I went to the motel laundromat. Warm drums thumped like a heart that wasn't mine. I sat on a plastic chair and thought one thought. I gave myself the luxury of trusting without checking. That's over. Friday is my last dispatch run. Everything calculated, but life can always toss a nail under your wheel. I'll bring the jack and tools. If I have to, I'll change the tire alone. If I'm lucky, someone will slow down and hand me a wrench. By evening, I rechecked the tracker, the phone battery, the fallback route, made sure the camera in my unit covered the aisle. Then I lay down. Before lights out, I pressed my palm to the lid of my receipt box. Paper, like metal, holds warmth and memory. Let it hold me, too. Friday morning smelled like fried dough from the stand by the tire shop and exhaust from the interchange. The sky was flat, like a well-worn sheet. I arrived early, circled the check-cashing booth, counted cameras, noted every reflective surface. Lila texted, I'm nearby. Martin parked where he could see both the door and the lot. We said little. Every extra word is a part that can jam the works. The blue card sat in my pocket, a button-sized tracker glued to its interface. I practiced by the soda machine, dropping my keys, bending slowly, because your body remembers clumsiness better than acting. When the crowd thickened, I moved to the trash can between the booth and the car wash, let a paper cup slip, brushed my pocket, and let the card skate onto the asphalt. My heart hit twice, like a relay. Martin's phone gave a soft tick, like a backroom light switch. Cassidy peeled out of the line, hood up, sleeves past her fingers. She bent to pick up trash, and the card vanished into her sleeve. Lila stood by the newspaper box, worrying a coin. That was our signal. They're taking it. Inside the booth, the clerk counted bills without looking up. Everything moved along the lines we'd drawn. Then someone threw a foreign part into the mechanism. The same cop from the station stepped into the booth like a refrigerator. Cold first. He looked at me as if I were a line item on the order. You're not permitted to approach the subjects. Heads lifted. I felt the plan crunch, as if gravel had gotten under it. Raising my voice would feed the people who hide behind the letter of the law. So I stepped back, let my hands drop, and watched. Watching is an action, too. A gray-blue fraud unit car slid in without sirens, like equipment that does its job without applause. Evelyn materialized at the far edge of the lot, not empty-handed, with keys to a pickup. She met Cassidy's eyes. A tiny nod. We're moving. I saw them cut the air toward the truck. In that beat, the clerk dropped a strap of bills. Green rectangles hissed like dry grass. Martin stepped out and spoke to the cop in quick, low phrases, showing something on his phone. He mouthed to me, "Buy time." The pickup lurched. We tailed them without sticking. The highway took us under its concrete wings. I counted lane changes the way I once counted axles at the dock gate. Right lane leads to storage. Left goes to the malls. They drifted right, then further right, toward the metal rows of units baring their teeth as narrow slits. At the gate, the guard lifted the arm without a single question. I wondered how much he gets paid not to see. In our row, the air rang with emptiness. Evelyn swung to her unit, tossed a bag down, snapped the lock open with fast, sure hands. On the floor, those same bags printed with the bargain tax office logo, neatly banded envelopes with seals, boxes from boutiques. Cassidy trembled like an antenna, scooping boxes, glancing around. I knew what came next. Hide, shuffle, dump, whatever it takes to tear the documentary threads. Martin raised his palm and the fraud unit rolled into frame with dispatcher precision. The woman in the dark suit said, "Don't move," without raising her voice. Evelyn smiled the way people smile who've survived for years on deals. Her eyes slid past me. To her, I was office furniture in a room she thought she owned. Cassidy wavered toward me and gave the smallest nod at the next door. My unit. A cold pinprick. They'd prepped a plan to offload part of this onto me. Two fraud investigators were already swinging my door open. Inside, the prepared copies, the timer on the wall, the thermos, the bags with stickers, every one of my decoys. I hadn't stolen a thing, but the danger in moments like this isn't guilt. It's interpretation. I needed air, facts. It arrived. Lila stepped out from behind a car, a folder trembling in her hands. She passed it to the woman in the suit. Inside were printouts of virtual card flows with timestamps, internal chats from the office, and a duty roster for the booth. Enough pieces for the lines to snap into a map. The set piece landed. In one frame, we had everything at once. The glass booth from the earlier photo, my unit with markers and a timer, their unit with live cash, faces without filters, the fraud unit car, Martin with his phone, and the guard. Gone very quiet. The cop from the station stopped speaking in order words and started speaking in case words. He looked cramped between yesterday's paperwork and today's geography. I stood where the gate's shadow met a strip of sun. My hands shook not from fear, but from stored current. I thought of something simple. All the years I taught people to respect the paper trail. Receipt, signature, timestamp. Today, the paper spoke better than any shout. And I thought of something else. If someone at the station had handed me one right phone number yesterday instead of a pamphlet, I might have saved weeks of my life. The world doesn't give that number, which means sometimes you have to write it into the air yourself. An investigation isn't a movie. No music, just ticking clocks and the hiss of copies. The fraud unit unrolled the scheme slowly and deadly efficiently. On the table, lists of easy clients, refund templates, screenshots of the office's private chats, routes to the booth, a roster of night cash outs. Evelyn held the net by its knots. Each helper managed her own cluster of seniors. Some money settled into rentals and cheap cars. The rest dissolved on virtual cards like sugar in boiling water. Lila told it straight, without polishing herself. Her honesty wasn't virtue. It was exhaustion. I walked carpetless halls, sat in windowless rooms, answered the same questions in different words. One morning, they asked me to name the first inconsistency. I said, "A receipt corner turned the wrong way in my box." The investigator smirked, but wrote it down. Sometimes the small hook is how you snag the whale. My son didn't call. I didn't either. We stood on opposite ends of a bridge under long repairs. You can shout, but you won't hear each other. He came on his own, one day, without warning, sat on the edge of the bed in my room above the bike shop, and stared at the window where the highway pulled light in stripes. Softly, he said he'd been wrong, that he signed in the wrong place. I nodded, not as a judge, but as someone with her own list of mistakes. I already knew about the pregnancy from Lila. He said it too, like he was afraid the glass would crack if he spoke. I didn't hug him. I slid a glass of water toward him. Sometimes that's the best language. The hearings began the way autumn begins, barely noticeable, and then, suddenly, everywhere. Evelyn walked in with the look of people used to conference rooms, the face that says, "We'll work this out." It didn't work out. They hit her with my case and two old ones. Cassidy shook at first, then learned to sit very still. Lila held her folder like a shield. The judge peered over his glasses and asked plain questions. They asked me if I wanted the maximum. I remembered the neighbor's "just for gas" card I borrowed 10 years ago on the night the insurer wouldn't cover half the bill. I paid it all back, but the grit stayed between my teeth. "I want the maximum for the organizer," I said, "and a program, restitution, and community service for the one who carried the bags. The law should work. Pain shouldn't run it." That was my unexpected ending. I chose measure, not a swing. Not because I'm soft, because I know the price of paper and of people. The judge nodded. Evelyn's gaze shifted for the first time. Not fear, but the tiredness of someone who finally reached the end of a bad road. Cassidy pled, took repayments, hours for the public. A program. Lila got the minimum and protection as an informant. And they returned my receipt box officially. The clerk set it on the table like a lost suitcase finding its owner. I didn't take the house back. A home isn't walls. It's how power is divided. They needed a roof. I needed air. I rented a small studio above the bike shop. Chains rattled by day. The storefront coolers hummed steady at night. I set up my old sewing machine, cleared the table. I took the blue card that started my night dispatch run and melted it between two sheets of baking paper in the landlady's oven. The plastic buckled into a wave. I cut an uneven shard and stitched it into the patchwork quilt I'm building from old shirts. Let it be a seam that doesn't come apart again. My son started stopping by, sometimes alone, sometimes with Cassidy. She sat on a stool by the window, hands around her belly, sipping tea in small sips. We hardly spoke. Words are expensive currency. Better to save them for what matters. Talk happened in details. He brought me a packet of needles. She brought a bag of flour for a pie when it gets easier. I answered in fabric, hemmed their curtains, reinforced a pocket on his jacket, sewed elastic into a baby cap I'd bought on clearance at the pharmacy by the ramp. Lila came with a thermos, the same kind that sat in my unit on the scene. Inside was trucker coffee, strong, no questions. She said, "Thanks for believing." I smiled. I didn't believe. I verified. Sometimes that's the same thing. In spring, they put up a small fair by the interchange. Caramel stalls, boxes of second-hand clothes, tables where people sold what their hands could do. I laid out my hems and denim totes. The quilt hung like a map of a strange country. A middle-aged woman ran her finger along the blue plastic wave. "What's this piece?" she asked. "A reminder that love is boundaries," I said. "Without them, everything unravels." She nodded like she'd heard her own address in my words. Walking back, I caught myself thinking. Punishment rarely returns what was stolen. More often, it just moves pain from one shelf to another. But sometimes, the light gets moved with it. The kid from the shop brought me his grandmother's receipts to sort by month. I sat down, set a ruler, turned each corner left, like before. Paper became a map again, not trash. That night, the fridge clicked, a familiar electric mosquito. I didn't flinch. My folder lay by my hand, the quilt with the blue wave hung on the wall, and the road outside ran straight, like a line you can keep with one hand. The lesson turned out simple and strong. Documents matter, but your voice matters more. Mercy isn't the end of justice. It's the fine adjustment. Love isn't closing your eyes. It's opening the box and counting what others call small stuff. With that arithmetic, I finally wasn't afraid to keep living.